General Eth had served the Dominion for 40 cycles. He had conquered worlds without number. He had watched species fall to their knees before the might of his fleets. His name was spoken with fear across 100 star systems. But on this day, as he stood before the High Tribunal on Prime, something had changed in the old general. His 4 eyes carried a look that none had ever seen in him before. It was the look of genuine fear. The tribunal chamber was vast. Pillars of black stone rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. 7 members of the High Tribunal sat on raised thrones of crystal and metal. At their center was Lord, the High Arbiter, ruler of all Dominion space. His pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light, and his expression showed only boredom as Eth spoke. "I have studied the humans for 3 cycles," Eth said. His voice echoed through the chamber. "I have watched them from hidden observation posts. I have analyzed their history, their wars, their nature. And I stand before you today with a single request. Leave them alone. Grant them neutrality. Do not make enemies of these creatures." Lord leaned back in his throne. A thin smile crossed his face. "You speak of fear, General. You who broke the spine of the resistance. You who burned the forests of Prime. You fear these humans." "I do not use that word lightly," Eth replied. "But yes, I fear what they will become if we provoke them." Laughter filled the chamber. The tribunal members looked at each other with amusement. Even the guards standing at the doors seemed to smile beneath their helmets. Only Eth remained still, his expression unchanged. "Tell us then," Lord said, waving a hand dismissively. "Tell us why we should fear a species that has been in space for barely a century. Tell us why 12,000 ships should worry about 70. Eth had prepared for this. He activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images appeared in the air, showing a small blue planet orbiting an average yellow star. "This is Earth," he said. "The human, it is not remarkable in any physical sense. Average gravity, breathable atmosphere, nothing special." He paused. "But look at what they have done there." The images shifted. They showed human history compressed into moments. Primitive humans hunting with stone tools, cities rising from mud, ships crossing vast oceans, armies clashing on bloody fields, and then something that made even the bored tribunal members lean forward. In less than a single cycle of their time, they went from these simple weapons to this. The image showed a massive explosion, a mushroom cloud rising over a ruined city. They split the atom. They created a weapon capable of destroying their own world, and they did it not through slow progress but through the pressure of war. "They almost destroyed themselves," Lord said. "This speaks of stupidity, not strength." "No," Eth said firmly. "It speaks of something far more dangerous. They did not destroy themselves. They looked into the abyss of their own extinction and they stepped back, but they kept the weapons. They kept the knowledge. And they have never stopped preparing for the next war." He changed the display again. Now it showed human conflicts throughout their history. They have been fighting each other for 10,000 cycles. They have never known true peace. Every generation has seen war. They treat combat not as a last resort but as an art form. They have perfected it in ways that we have never imagined. "Pretty pictures," another tribunal member said. "But numbers do not lie, General. We have 12,000 ships. They have 70. This is not a war. It is an execution." Eth turned to face this speaker directly. "When I first encountered humans, I observed one of their military vessels. It was small, poorly armed by our standards, but I watched its crew operate for 6 cycles. They trained constantly. They ran drills at all hours. They pushed themselves beyond exhaustion and then pushed further. I have never seen such dedication in any species we have conquered." He walked closer to the tribunal. "But that is not what frightened me. What frightened me was what I saw in their recreational activities. They play games that simulate war. Their children play at killing each other for entertainment. Their most popular stories are about conflict, about struggle, about overcoming impossible odds. They are a species that has built its entire identity around the concept of fighting against the darkness. Lord waved his hand again. Enough. You have made your case, General, and it is unconvincing. The Dominion does not avoid conflict because a species has spirit. We crush spirit. That is what we do. That is what we have always done. You do not understand, Eth said, and now there was desperation in his voice. Every species we have conquered, we conquered because they were logical. They saw our numbers, they calculated the odds, and they surrendered or fought a limited resistance before accepting defeat. Humans will not do this. They do not think like us. They do not think like any species I have ever studied. And what do they think like? Lord asked with mock curiosity. Eth was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. They think like survivors, like predators who have been hiding their teeth. They have a concept they call spite. It means to harm another even at cost to yourself, simply because you refuse to let them win. They will burn their own worlds before letting us take them. They will sacrifice everything just to hurt us. And once they start, they will never ever stop. The chamber was silent. Lord studied the general for a long moment. Then he laughed, and the sound was cold. Your fear has made you weak, General. The Dominion has spoken. The Third Fleet will enter human space within 3 days. They will be given a simple choice: submit or be subjugated. And when they kneel, as all species do, you will see that your concerns were nothing but the imaginings of an old soldier who has lost his nerve. Eth stood tall. He had tried. That was all he could do. I will record my objections in the official archives, and I will pray to whatever gods might listen that I am wrong about everything I have said today. Pray all you wish, Lord replied. It will not change the outcome. The humans will fall, they all fall. 3 days later, the Third Fleet of the Dominion entered the Sol system. 1,000 warships surrounded the small blue planet called Earth. The commander of the fleet broadcast a simple message to the humans: surrender your worlds, your ships, and your freedom, or face total annihilation. The humans received the message. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of Dominion space, General Eth closed his eyes and waited for the storm that he knew was coming. Admiral Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of the USS Constellation and stared at the holographic display before him. The image showed 1,000 alien warships arranged in a perfect sphere around Earth. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Each one carried enough firepower to glass a continent. And behind them, the message had said, were 11,000 more. Commander Laura stood beside him. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She read the alien ultimatum again, even though she had already memorized every word. They want us to surrender all military vessels, disband our governments, accept Dominion governors on every colony, and provide workers for their mining operations. Slaves, said Captain Cole from his position at the tactical station. He was younger than the others, barely 40, but he had earned his rank through skill and courage. They want slaves, not workers. Brooks nodded slowly. He had been in the Navy for 35 years. He had trained for every possible scenario, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing could prepare anyone for the end of human freedom. How long do we have? He asked. 48 hours, replied. After that, they begin planetary bombardment. The bridge was silent. Every officer present knew the mathematics of the situation. 70 human ships against 1,000 alien vessels, with 11,000 more waiting. The odds were not just bad, they were impossible. Brooks walked to the communications station. He opened a channel to Earth, to the United Earth Command Center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The face that appeared on screen was Admiral, the commander of all human military forces. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. Admiral, Brooks said, we have received the Dominion ultimatum, requesting orders. Was quiet for a moment. Behind her, Brooks could see other officers moving frantically, could hear voices shouting information and updates. The entire planet was watching. 8 billion people were waiting to hear what humanity would do. Admiral Brooks finally said, "I have consulted with the Security Council. I have spoken with leaders from every nation on Earth, and I have listened to the voices of our people." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady as stone. "We will not surrender. You are authorized to engage the enemy. Make them pay for every inch of our space." Brooks felt something shift in his chest. It was not surprise. Somehow he had known this would be the answer. Humans did not kneel. They never had. "Understood," he said. "Constellation out." He turned to face his crew. Every eye was on him. These men and women had families on the planet below. They had children, parents, lovers, friends, and they were about to fight a battle that they could not win. "You heard the order," Brooks said. "We fight, not because we can win, but because surrender is not who we are. We fight because we are human, and humans do not go quietly into the night. Prepare for combat." The word spread across the fleet in seconds. 70 ships began powering their weapons. Pilots ran to their fighters. Engineers pushed reactors to maximum output. And on Earth, something even more remarkable began to happen. The factories shifted. Car plants that had been building vehicles for civilians began producing armored transports. Electronics factories switched to targeting systems. Shipyards that had been constructing cargo haulers started welding armor plating and weapon mounts. Within 6 hours, the entire industrial capacity of Earth, Mars, and the Belt was focused on a single purpose: war. Price was a logistics officer stationed on Mars. He was 42 years old, slightly overweight, and had never seen combat in his life. But when the call came, he worked 18 hours straight coordinating supply lines. He connected mining operations with factories, factories with shipyards, shipyards with the fleet. He did not sleep. He did not eat. He simply worked because that was what needed to be done. Dr. Torres was on Titan. She had spent her career studying alien microbes, dreaming of peaceful first contact with intelligent life. When the Dominion arrived, she abandoned her research and began a new project. Within days, she had developed a pathogen that targeted the specific biology of the Dominion species. It was not a kind weapon. She did not care. Sargent was a training instructor on Luna Base. He had 20 years of experience teaching young recruits how to fight. Now he had to compress years of training into weeks. He pushed his recruits until they collapsed, then pushed them more. Some broke. Most did not. The ones who survived were not soldiers. They were weapons. Across human space, the story was the same. Scientists became weapon designers. Teachers became tacticians. Farmers became soldiers. The Dominion had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that humanity's small military represented its full fighting capacity. They did not understand that every human was a potential warrior. They did not understand that war was in human blood. The first battle came on the third day. Admiral Brooks led the fleet out to meet the Dominion advance. He knew he could not win a straight fight, so he did not fight one. He used the asteroid belt as cover, hiding ships behind tumbling rocks and striking from ambush. He ordered his captains to target engines and weapons systems, to cripple rather than destroy, to force the Dominion to spread their forces thin, protecting damaged vessels. Captain Cole took his squadron of 12 frigates against a Dominion dreadnought. His ships were smaller, weaker, in every way. But Cole knew something the Dominion did not. He knew how to make smaller ships dance. He wove between the dreadnought's weapons fire. He used its own size against it, staying in blind spots, striking at vulnerable points. When his ship was hit, when flames filled the corridors and his crew screamed in pain, he did not retreat. He ordered his surviving crew to the escape pods. Then, alone on the burning bridge, he aimed his crippled vessel at the dreadnought's reactor core and pushed the engines to full power. The explosion was visible from Earth. The dreadnought died. 3 cruisers that had moved too close died with it. Cole's last transmission was recorded and broadcast to every human ship in the system. "Tell them we didn't run. Tell them we fought." The Battle of Saul lasted 11 days. The humans lost. That was never in question. 63 of their 70 ships were destroyed. Earth was surrounded. The Dominion had won. But victory had cost them 800 ships. 800 vessels lost to a species that should have fallen in hours. And worse, they had not captured humanity's spirit. Admiral Brooks had escaped with 7 ships and the civilian evacuation fleet. 30 million humans had disappeared into the asteroid belt, taking with them weapons, supplies, and an unbroken will to fight. The Dominion had taken the Sol system. They had not taken the humans. And somewhere in the darkness of the belt, Admiral Brooks began planning his next move. General Eth arrived in the Sol system 6 months after the initial invasion. He had been sent to observe, to analyze, to understand why the conquest of a minor species had become the most costly operation in Dominion history. What he found was worse than anything he had imagined. The Third Fleet had won the battle. That much was true. They controlled the space around Earth. They had landed troops on the surface. They had raised the Dominion flag over human cities, but control was an illusion. The humans had not stopped fighting. They had simply changed how they fought. Eth stood on the bridge of his observation vessel and watched the reports come in. A supply convoy had been ambushed near Jupiter. 17 cargo ships destroyed, their contents scattered across the void. A garrison on Mars had been attacked in the night. 40 soldiers dead, their throats cut while they slept. A communications relay had exploded, taking out the entire command network for 6 hours. "How many resistance fighters have we captured?" Eth asked his aide. "In the past month, approximately 300, the aide replied. "And how many have given us useful information?" The aide hesitated. "None, General. They die before they talk. Some seem to die on purpose, biting through their own tongues or holding their breath until their hearts stop. Others simply refuse to speak, no matter what methods we use." Eth closed his eyes. He had warned them. He had told the tribunal exactly what would happen. But they had not listened, and now the Dominion was bleeding from 1,000 small cuts. The human resistance was led by ghosts. Admiral Brooks commanded from somewhere in the asteroid belt, but no one could find him. His ships appeared without warning, struck hard, and vanished before Dominion forces could respond. Commander ran the intelligence network, gathering information through methods that Dominion security could not detect. And there were others, hundreds of others, each one a knife in the darkness. Lieutenant Commander was one of these ghosts. She had been a communications officer before the invasion, a quiet woman who spent her days managing data streams. Now she coordinated resistance cells across 3 planets. She never stayed in one place for more than 2 days. She trusted no one completely, and she had personally killed 11 Dominion soldiers with her own hands. Chief Petty Officer Grant was another. He ran supply lines through the debris fields around Saturn, using paths so dangerous that no Dominion pilot dared follow. He had lost his brother in the Battle of Saul. He had sworn on that brother's memory that he would never stop fighting, never surrender, never forgive. The Dominion tried everything. They increased patrols, they imposed curfews, they took hostages. They executed prisoners in public, hoping to break human will through fear. Nothing worked. For every human they killed, 2 more seemed to take their place. For every cell they destroyed, 3 more appeared. Dr. Torres delivered her greatest weapon 8 months into the occupation. It was a biological agent, engineered to target the specific genetic markers of the Dominion species. It caused their respiratory systems to slowly fail, filling their lungs with fluid over a period of weeks. It was contagious. It was untreatable, and it had already been released in every major Dominion installation in the system. The death toll was enormous. Thousands of Dominion soldiers drowned in their own bodies. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. Fear spread faster than the disease itself. Soldiers began refusing assignments on the surface. Some deserted entirely, stealing ships and fleeing back toward Dominion space. Eth watched the reports with a mixture of horror and grim respect. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to cause pain. They had a word for this, one that did not translate well into any Dominion language. Spite. The desire to harm an enemy even when it brought no benefit, even when it cost everything. He requested a meeting with a captured human officer. Her name was, and she had been a major in the resistance before her capture. She sat across from him in a bare metal room, her hands bound, her face bruised from interrogation. But her eyes were clear and her smile was cold. "Why do you keep fighting?" Eth asked. "Your world is occupied, your fleet is destroyed, your leaders are scattered. By any rational calculation, you have lost. Why not accept reality and save what remains of your people?" Laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You really don't understand us at all, do you?" "Then explain it to me." She leaned forward as far as her chains would allow. "We have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We have survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and wars that killed millions. We have invented weapons that could destroy our entire world, and we have chosen not to use them. Not because we are peaceful, but because we were waiting for a worthy enemy." She smiled wider. "You are not that enemy, you are just practice." Eth felt a chill run through his body. "You are one prisoner, your words mean nothing." "My words mean everything," said. "Because I am not alone. There are billions like me. Every human child is raised on stories of resistance, of survival, of defiance against impossible odds. We do not surrender because surrender is not in our nature. We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. And we would rather burn our own worlds than let you have them." She was executed the next day. Eth signed the order himself. He told himself it was necessary, that she was too dangerous to live. But the truth was simpler. He was afraid of her. He was afraid of what she represented. Her death changed nothing. A week later, her name was painted on a bomb that destroyed the largest Dominion supply depot in the system. A month later, her face appeared on posters across occupied Earth, with the words "Remember" written beneath. She became a symbol, a martyr, a rallying cry. The occupation was bleeding the Dominion dry. Ships that were needed elsewhere were trapped in the Sol system. Resources that should have been building new fleets were being poured into holding a single hostile system. The High Tribunal began to receive messages from other sectors, complaints about stretched supply lines and delayed reinforcements. Eth sent a report to Prime. He explained the situation in detail. He recommended withdrawal, a tactical retreat that would allow the Dominion to rebuild and reconsider. He knew what the response would be before he received it. Withdrawal is not an option. Increase suppression efforts, break the humans. Eth read the message and felt something he had not felt in 40 cycles of service. He felt despair, because he knew the truth that the High Tribunal refused to accept. You could not break the humans. You could only make them angrier. 2 years had passed since the invasion. 2 years of blood and fire and death. 2 years of occupation, resistance, and a war that neither side could afford but neither side would abandon. General Eth had been given command of the Sol occupation after 3 predecessors had failed. The first had been killed in a bombing. The second had suffered a mental collapse and was sent home in restraints. The third had simply disappeared, his shuttle found drifting empty in the asteroid belt. Eth survived because he understood. He did not underestimate the humans. He did not assume that superior numbers meant superior strength. He fought carefully, cautiously, always expecting the unexpected, and still he was losing. The Dominion had poured resources into the Sol system. Ships, soldiers, supplies, all flowing into a single occupied territory that refused to stay conquered. For every victory they claimed, the humans found a way to turn it into defeat. For every leader they killed, a new one emerged from the shadows. The occupation was not a war anymore. It was a wound that would not heal. Eth walked the surface of Mars one evening, surrounded by guards, studying the landscape that had become a graveyard for so many of his soldiers. The red dust was stained darker in places, marks of battles that had no winners. Ruined buildings stood like broken teeth against the pale sky. He stopped at a memorial that the humans had built in secret. It was just a pile of stones with names scratched into them, hidden in a crater where Dominion patrols rarely ventured. Hundreds of names, thousands, each one a human who had died fighting. They honor their dead, he said to himself. Even in defeat they honor their dead. His aide looked uncomfortable. Should we destroy it, General? Eth shook his head. No, let it stand. Perhaps it will remind us of what we are facing. Far from Mars, hidden in the darkness of the outer system, Admiral Daniel Brooks was preparing something that would change everything. The asteroid was called Haven. It was not on any official charts. The humans had hollowed it out in the first months of the occupation, creating a secret base that the Dominion had never found. Inside its cold stone shell, a fleet was being born. Brooks stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing ship production schedules, resource allocations, and personnel assignments. Commander Laura stood beside him, as she had for 2 years. Her hair had gone fully white now, and new lines marked her face. But her eyes were still sharp, still burning with the same fire that had kept them fighting through the darkest days. "How many ships?" Brooks asked. 212 combat-ready vessels, replied. 37 more will be complete within the month. 200 ships. It was not enough to match the Dominion's full strength, but it was enough to hurt them. It was enough to make them bleed. The fleet had been built through miracles. Engineers had worked with salvage and scraps, turning damaged hulls into new warships. Miners had extracted rare metals from asteroids, working in conditions that would have killed lesser people. Scientists had developed new weapons, new shields, new systems that gave human ships an edge their enemies did not expect. But the fleet was not just human. In the 2 years of occupation, something remarkable had happened. Word of human resistance had spread through Dominion space. Other conquered species, ones who had surrendered long ago and accepted their fate, began to hear stories of a people who refused to kneel. They heard of humans who fought against impossible odds. They heard of spite and sacrifice and a defiance that nothing could break. And some of them began to hope. The first defectors arrived 8 months after the invasion. 3 soldiers escaped from a labor camp, seeking the humans they had heard so much about. Brooks welcomed them personally. He asked them why they had come, why they had risked death to find humanity's hidden fleet. "Because you showed us something we had forgotten," one of them said. "You showed us that the Dominion can bleed, and if they can bleed, they can die." More followed. Engineers who sabotaged Dominion ships before fleeing. Pilots who stole fighters and flew them to human space. Even a few, members of the Dominion's own ruling species, disgusted by what their empire had become. They came seeking something that the Dominion had tried to crush out of the galaxy: freedom. Brooks welcomed them all. He did not care about species or origin. He cared about the fire in their hearts. And by the 2nd anniversary of the invasion, the United Earth Remnant Fleet was not just human anymore. It was a coalition, a brotherhood of the defiant. Dr. Torres had continued her work as well. Her laboratory on Haven produced weapons that the Dominion could not counter. She had developed targeting systems that could track Dominion ships through their unique energy signatures. She had created ammunition that could penetrate Dominion armor. And she had refined her biological weapons into something even more terrible, a last resort that she prayed they would never need. The training programs never stopped. New recruits arrived constantly, humans who had escaped the occupation, aliens who had found their way to Haven. They were taught by veterans of the Battle of Saul, by survivors who had learned hard lessons in blood. The schools produced warriors who knew no fear, who understood that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. On the 2nd anniversary of the invasion, Admiral Brooks gathered his senior officers in Haven's main hangar. 200 ships hung in the darkness around them, waiting for their moment. The faces before him were tired, aged beyond their years, but their eyes burned with something that no amount of suffering could extinguish. 2 years ago they came to our home, Brooks said. They told us to kneel. We refused. They killed our friends, our families, our children. They thought they could break us with death. They were wrong. He looked out at the fleet, at the impossible thing they had built from nothing. Tomorrow we begin Operation Homecoming. We are going to take back our system. We are going to free our people. And we are going to show the Dominion something they have never seen before. His voice rose, filling the hangar. We are going to show them what happens when you wake a sleeping giant, when you push humanity too far, when you make us your enemy. Commander stepped forward. What if we fail? Brooks smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in 2 years. Then we die fighting, and we take as many of them with us as we can, because that is what humans do. We fight until the end, we never surrender, and we never ever forget. The fleet launched at dawn. The Dominion's long nightmare was about to get worse. The Dominion detected the approaching fleet when it crossed the orbit of Neptune. Sensors screamed alerts across every station, every ship, every outpost in the Sol system. General Eth received the report on Mars and felt his heart stop for a moment. "How many ships?" he asked, already knowing the answer would be bad. "Over 200, General, and they are not all human designs. We are detecting vessels, transports, even some of our own ships that were reported stolen." Eth closed his eyes. The Coalition, the humans had done what no species in Dominion history had ever accomplished. They had united the conquered. They had built an alliance from the ashes of defeat. "Recall all ships to Earth orbit," he ordered. "Every vessel we have, we make our stand there." The Battle of Earth began 6 hours later. Admiral Brooks led the assault from the bridge of the USS Defiance, a dreadnought-class vessel that had been built in secret inside a hollowed asteroid. It was the largest ship humanity had ever constructed, and it carried the hopes of every free being in the system. The Dominion fleet numbered 400 ships. The Coalition had 217. The odds were still against them, but they were better than they had ever been. Brooks opened a channel to the entire fleet. His voice reached every bridge, every cockpit, every human and alien who had come to fight for freedom. "This is Admiral Brooks. 2 years ago they took our home. 2 years ago they told us that resistance was pointless, that we should accept our fate and submit. 2 years ago we refused." He looked at the blue marble of Earth, visible now through the bridge windows, surrounded by enemy ships like a jewel in a cage of iron. "Today we take back what is ours. Today we show them that the spirit of freedom cannot be killed. Today we fight for everyone who died believing we would come. Do not hold back. Do not hesitate. Make them remember this day forever." The fleet surged forward. Commander Laura coordinated the attack from her position at the tactical station. She had planned this battle for 18 months, running simulations, studying Dominion tactics, preparing for every possible scenario. Now she put that knowledge to work, directing squadrons with precise commands, exploiting weaknesses the moment they appeared. The ships hit the Dominion left flank, fast and agile, drawing fire away from the main assault. The vessels targeted enemy communications, disrupting their coordination, and the human ships did what they did best. They charged straight into the heart of the enemy formation and started killing. Captain Lee led a squadron of 12 destroyers against a Dominion carrier. His ships were smaller, weaker, but he had learned from the legends of the first battle. He used debris as cover, asteroids as weapons, his own damaged vessels as missiles when all else failed. The carrier fell, and Lee's squadron emerged with only 3 ships remaining. Lieutenant Sarah Daniels flew her fighter through the corridors of a Dominion dreadnought, targeting critical systems from inside the ship itself. She had entered through a breach in the hull and flew through maintenance tunnels meant for repair drones. It was insane. It was suicidal. It worked. The Dreadnought's reactor failed and the explosion took out 4 escort ships. Dr. Torres monitored the battle from Haven, ready to deploy her final weapon if needed. She prayed she would not need it. She prayed that conventional warfare would be enough. The battle raged for 6 hours. General Eth commanded his fleet with every bit of skill he possessed. He was not a coward, and he was not a fool. He fought brilliantly, salvaging victories from what should have been defeats, keeping his forces organized even as the coalition tore through them. But it was not enough. The humans did not fight like any enemy the Dominion had faced. They did not retreat when damaged. They did not surrender when surrounded. They attacked with a ferocity that bordered on madness, every pilot seeming to believe that death was an acceptable price for victory. And they were not alone. The aliens who had joined them fought with the same intensity, as if the human spirit had infected them. Species that had been conquered for generations remembered what it felt like to be free. They remembered what it felt like to fight back. When the Dominion flagship was finally boarded, Eth did not resist. He stood on his bridge as human Marines poured through the doors, their weapons raised, their faces hard. Leading them was a man named Christopher Grant, a sergeant whose brother had died running supply lines 2 years ago. "General Eth," Grant said, his voice was cold. "Your fleet is destroyed, your occupation is over, you are our prisoner." Eth nodded slowly. He had expected to die here, perhaps he still would. "You should have listened to me," he said. "I told them this would happen. I warned them." "We know," Grant replied. "We intercepted your report to the tribunal. We know you tried to stop this war." Eth looked at the human, surprised. "Then why are you here? Why have you not killed me?" Grant lowered his weapon slightly. "Because you were right, and because my brother would have wanted me to be better than them." The Dominion surrendered 3 weeks later, not because their entire military was destroyed, but because they understood now what they faced. The humans would not stop. If the war continued, humanity would burn a path through Dominion space that would not end until every last world was ash. Lord was forced to sign the Treaty of Geneva aboard a human station orbiting Earth. He sat across from Admiral Brooks, flanked by representatives of every species in the coalition. His face showed nothing, but his hands trembled. "How did you do this?" asked. "We had every advantage, numbers, technology, experience. How did you defeat us?" Brooks thought of everyone who had died. He thought of, smiling through blood. He thought of Cole piloting his burning ship into the enemy. He thought of the millions of humans and aliens who had sacrificed everything for this moment. "You attacked our home," Brooks said. "You threatened our families. You tried to make us slaves." He leaned forward and his eyes held a fire that could not meet. "We do not lose wars fought for survival. We never have. We never will." Humanity took its place among the stars that day, not as a young species, not as newcomers, but as something the galaxy had never seen before, a predator that had been pretending to be prey, a giant that had finally awakened. General Eth spent his remaining years on Earth, a prisoner treated with unexpected kindness. He wrote his memoirs, a document that became required reading at military academies across known space. The title was simple, a reminder to every future conqueror who might consider challenging humanity. The title was, "I Warned Them." And in the centuries that followed, whenever a species considered starting a war with humans, they would read those words and remember. Some warnings should be heeded. Some enemies should never be made.